And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. To the outside world, I may smile or look as if all is well, but I've been through a lot, and it had all been my fault. You see, I had an affair with my husband's boss, and my husband found out and went after my only family seeking revenge. Before you all come for me, which is fair and fine, my husband had no right going after my mother for something I did. It was me that had slept with his boss. Why did he have to go for my mother? Hi, Redditors, I had an affair with my husband's boss. I didn't know what had come over me to propel me to do that, but I had done it. And it hadn't been a one-time thing. I can't say it had been the devil. That would be an added lie. I might have started it to probably spite my husband. No, this whole situation had started because I had been unhappy with his situation at work. My husband had worked his butt off. He was deserving of a promotion. So I had approached his boss at work. Well, I didn't know that would come back to bite me in the face. My husband had been beyond livid. And a fight started up between the two of us that lasted for more than a week. According to him, I had no right to interfere with his doings at work, and his colleagues now saw him as a sissy. How that was my fault was something I still struggled to understand till this day. I had just been looking out for him because I knew how hard he worked to please his boss. I knew how hard he had worked to be able to at least make the cutoff for the promotion at his workplace. Heck, I had always been the receiving end of his frustration whenever a project hadn't gone well or something wasn't adding up or was amiss. But my husband hadn't gotten where my concern had stemmed from. To him, I had insulted his pride by going to confront his boss. And it's not even as if I'd had a physical fight with his boss. I had just had a little chat with him. Here's how it had happened. It was his workplace annual couples retreat for workers so they could get to know each other and their families. I had been invited as my husband's plus one. If I had known it would start this whole cycle of events, I would have stayed home. Well, my husband and I got there when the party was already underway, with people mingling about in my husband's workplace lobby. It was like a normal office day, but with drinks and chips and outsiders, I think. Well, what had I known? Through the party, I noticed my history kept trying to meet the E of his boss to introduce us. Note at this point, I had thought my husband's boss was the devil's spawn. I hadn't known I would share my bed with the devil's spawn out of spite for my husband. However, through the course of the party, my husband's boss didn't even so much as glance his way. And that added to my anger. When my husband's boss finally deemed it worthy to come our way, was when I had gone to fetch a punch by myself, and he just happened to pass by. And as promiscuous as men are, you can guess what happened next. He had the audacity to ask if I was at the party alone, when there was a huge rock sitting on my ring finger and my husband had been doing everything to get his attention. So I told him my mind and mentioned how hard my husband works to be able to make him richer and whatnot. It was uncalled for, but I had raised my voice so loud at him that it had garnered so much attention. From that day, my husband became so cold and emotionally unavailable towards me. At first, I had tried to apologize, to make everything right. I even went to his boss to apologize. He doesn't know about this, but yeah. I had done that in an effort to right my wrongs. I had even hosted him to a romantic dinner, something he hadn't done ever since he started fighting for a promotion in his office. Through the dinner, it was like I was talking to a statue who could only grunt out replies and sometimes not even reply to me. I mean, the straws had been gathering at this point and the camel's back was bordering on breaking at this moment. But I took it in as a good wife who had understood the frustrations of her husband. Was there anything wrong in what I had done? Anyway, the dinner didn't work, and what I did next got me more than just the silent treatment from my husband. I offered to help him get a new job. One of the biggest mistakes I had made in my marriage. A total mistake offering a man who loved to think of himself as the head of the family. You see, I was well-to-do and could pull a few strings to get him a high-status job. I wasn't complaining, and I wanted to do it. I might have even done once or twice without him knowing, but he hadn't accepted the job offers. However, I hadn't known he would take me suggesting to offer him a job as a death sentence. In his words, he had said he would rather die than give me bragging rights over his life. It seemed I hadn't known my husband after all. I had no idea whom I had married. Can you believe it? Before I delve in deeper to my experience on what led me to cheat on my husband, I want to give you all a little backstory about myself, my husband, and how we met. My name is Nora, and I'm 28 years old. My husband's name is Michael, and he's 28 years old. We had met 4 years ago. My husband's college frat had thrown a Halloween party, and I had followed a friend to go. I met my husband because we had both won Best Costume that night. And funny thing, we had matched through some weird twisted string of fate. I had gone as Daphne, he as Fred. That was how we had hit it off. We found out we were both in our second year and became close friends during that time. I had fallen for his charisma and the fact that he wasn't hitting on me because I was already wealthy off pocket. Most of the boyfriends I'd had before him had known I came from money and wanted to reap where they hadn't sown. You all needed to witness how they told me off when I broke it off with them. One had even called me a vain witch. So when I had been getting to know my husband, he hadn't shown those tendencies. Then we started dating a year later, and I introduced him to my family, and I had been right. I hadn't really been a great judge of character in my early adulthood, but I had been glad that I had done the right thing with my husband. We got married once we were done with college, and my husband got a job with his company without my help or the backing of my family. It had been nice watching him work from the scratch to provide for me as his little family. It had been more than nice, actually, but ever since the promotion hunt began, my marriage had turned into a nightmare. One I couldn't cope with anymore, so I had done what I had to do, not sleep with his boss. That came later. The main thing that had had my husband raise his voice and threaten to leave the marriage was when I had gone to see his boss to apologize for the fuss I had caused at the party. I had just wanted to offer an olive branch to his boss to see if maybe he would consider my husband for the promotion position, so I at least could have peace of mind. No. However, that seemed to have irked the life out of my husband, that I got a serious reprimand from him. On that day, I had never seen my husband act that way since I had known him. He was shouting, literally yelling and scattering things around the house and blaming me for all his problems. The words he had said to me wasn't something I could ever utter to someone in my life. They had been vulgar and demeaning and had me wondering how I had made the wrong choice in someone's character once again. Had he been hiding this side all along? How well did I truly know who I had married? I know you all would be thinking my husband shouting a few vulgar and demeaning words at me shouldn't be a reason enough for me to go and start having an affair with his boss. I didn't mean to, though. It had just happened, but I would be truthful and say my husband's demeaning words every night had been a push. Yep, you read right. Every night. My husband demeaned me ever since I had apologized to his boss. He had called me names, mummy's little girl and such, until I was pushed to leave the house because I couldn't take it anymore. I really couldn't. The day I had left the house for my husband to deal with his problems was the day I was pushed to drink. This was another mistake I regretted making. I should have just gone to my mother's place, but no, I had gone to drink away my frustrations with my husband. And I'm sure you guys can guess what happened next. My husband's boss happened next. Of all the bars in Manhattan, it was the one I had gone to nurture my wounds that the major cause of my problems decided to show up at. Talk about the devil. Of course he had to know who I was. That had to be the only reason he had approached me, and in my drunken haze, I had told him I found him handsome. Never drink alcohol, guys. It led to bad decisions. Bad decisions like following my husband's boss home for the night. Maybe I had done it to spite my husband. I admit to that before you all come for me. But someone should be able to understand my point of view. My marriage had already been ruined at that point. So I followed my husband's boss because in my head, my husband and I were over. These had been all my drunken thoughts. Thoughts that I would come to regret. I slept with my husband's boss. I had shared the same bed and exchanged human fluids with someone my husband looked up to at work. Oh my. This was what dawned on me the next morning when I woke up to my husband's call asking me to come home that he was sorry. It was already late. The deed had already been done. Do you guys think I should have told my husband then and there? Update 2. Well, back to narrating my experience. There was really nothing you all's advice could have done because the deed had already happened. I just wanted to know if you guys had been following. After the worst mistake of my life, I went back to my husband's house with guilt choking me to the brim, but I couldn't tell him. I know I had said I already saw my marriage as over, but those had just been the influence of alcohol. I didn't want my husband to leave me. I didn't want my marriage to end. It was one of the handful of things I had gotten right in my short life. I didn't want that ruined. And who hadn't made a cheating mistake before in their marriage? Even a look at another person that wasn't your spouse could be considered cheating. All of us married folks had cheated based on that line alone. So, I couldn't tell him. That would ruin my marriage for sure. I got back home and lied that I had been with my mother for the night. From then on, my husband became the one doing the apologizing. He would get me my favorite treats, take me to the salon, get me whatever it is I wanted. It was like my honeymoon all over again, and I was enjoying it. We talked, we laughed, we played games, and we had dinner together. It was like the quarrel that led to me making the mistake had never happened. It was like a lapse in time and a lapse in my judgment. The baby girl treatment was so beautiful to experience, but the guilt didn't allow me to enjoy it. It was choking, and I had no idea what to do at the time except go with the flow. That's exactly what I did, or that's what I should have done. However, I had dug a grave and had fallen so far into it. Tell me why I had gone back to my husband's boss. No, you don't need to tell me why. I was stupid, that was why, and I had ran back to my husband's boss at the smallest inconvenience. After the haze of my husband's apology phase was over, his frustrations with work and the stress over the office promotion started all over again. And once more, I had been the brunt of it. So I had run to the cause of the problem. My husband's boss had invited me for a drink, and I had told myself I wouldn't go. I wanted to work on my marriage, LOL. The irony. I went. I accepted the drink invitation and went over to my husband's boss place, under the delusion of going to just talk. As you can already guess, we did more than just talk. And this continued whenever my husband's problems became tedious for me to bear. My husband's boss treated me like a person. My husband treated me like a tool to relieve his stress. This time, I knew for sure my marriage was over, and I didn't want to revive it anymore. The problem I had at the moment was telling my husband I wanted a divorce without him finding out the reason behind it. I didn't really want to hurt him. Our problems aside, he had been the first man I had dated that I had actually loved and married, but we weren't working out. I was a soft girl, and I had tried my best in trying to fix his problems, but he had turned it all against me. I couldn't deal with that anymore. I had done all in my power, and now I just wanted to skedaddle. I tended to do that with any glimpse of stress. The affair with his boss, I didn't mean for that to happen, but you can't help who you sleep with, right? You fall for who you fall for. Wrong time and wrong place, but we can't all get it right with the details. Not that I had fallen for my husband's boss. No, I just didn't love my husband anymore for me to be able to cheat on him so freely. That had been my reasoning, and then I decided to end the affair with my husband's boss and also end my marriage. At this point, I don't even know if I was okay, because I wanted to end my marriage without trying to battle out our demons. I had to at least try with therapy. Maybe the feelings would come back and my husband would be able to get his own feelings back under control, and all would be well. So that's the route I took. Instead of confessing to my husband about the affair with his boss or ending my marriage, I decided to end the affair with his boss and register us for therapy. Well, fate had another plan for me. I wasn't superstitious or anything like that. Heck, if you had told me this was the turn my life would take after having an affair with my husband's boss, I wouldn't have believed you. But my life took a turn, a terrible turn at that. My husband's boss didn't allow me to slip from his grasp easily. I was really a terrible judge of character. The day I had gone to end our affair, my husband's boss said if I was going to do that, I should expect that my husband would lose his job immediately, and our affair would come out into the open. He basically threatened me, and I couldn't do anything about it or risk everything going south. I couldn't confess to my husband or he would lose his job because he would definitely go and confront his boss, and I was going to lose my marriage at the end. If I ended the affair, it was still bound to have the same outcome. There was no way out for me. I was toast. A badly burnt toast. So I didn't do anything. I continued the affair and tried to work on my marriage without confessing to my husband. On the bright side, thanks to my affair with my husband's boss, my husband got the promotion he so badly wanted. Yep, it had been a gift, a sacrifice on my part. Everything was finally going well. My husband was happy with his promotion, my secret was kept, nothing was going to go wrong. Lol. I had never been so wrong in my life. My world came to an end when my husband got his hands on security footage of me walking into a hotel with his boss's hand on the small of my waist. I don't know how that had happened. I averted the situation, of course, but that was the beginning of his suspicions. Every time my phone pinged with a text in the night, my husband's eyes would become trained on me. And my husband's boss wasn't helping my situation. He became very annoying and demanding. From calls and late-night texts, he started demanding, I leave my house in the middle of night to come over to his place to see him, or risk my secret coming out in the open. I was being torn in two at the moment. My husband was going to find out. Well, my husband found out, he found out, and everything I thought would happen in retribution happened. There was a big fight in his workplace, which led to him getting fired, and his boss threatened to never write him a good review letter. Everything had just happened so fast that I couldn't keep track of it all. What I had known at that moment was that my marriage was over for certain, and my husband was going to kick me out of the house, and he was going to tell all our friends that I had cheated. That's what I had expected to happen in the coming days after my secret was out in the open. In fact, that was what I had known was bound to happen, but once again, I was proven wrong. I was proven so wrong. The coming days after my husband confronted his boss over my affair had been the most silent days ever. My husband didn't even pretend like I was living in the same house with him. I counted the number of times I had passed by him, and he hadn't even done like a speck of dust had been raised. The silence was as brutal as the guilt that had eaten me up from not telling him. While I got used to the silence, however, it was not for long before things changed up again. I kept expecting him to rant and rake and throw me out of the house, but my husband kept doing the opposite. It was scary. From the silent treatment, he progressed to the baby girl treatment. Remember when I said he had acted up from his frustrations from work and had just come home all of a sudden and began treating me like it was our honeymoon? That was the scenario at this moment. He started up again, buying me gifts, takeouts, little heartwarming items. But he wasn't talking to me. He'll just lay them out on the table before going out or going to lock himself up in the guest bedroom. I had no idea what to make of it, and if I tell you, I wasn't scared, I was lying, because I was scared out of my pants. I didn't dare talk to him out of fear of unleashing the beast. I was of the notion that maybe he had seen my point of view without me explaining it to him. I had consulted my friends and asked them for help hypothetically. I didn't tell them about the cheating part, the fact that I'd had an affair with his boss. No, I wouldn't live that down. So I had just told them that I had done something wrong and needed to right it. Something along the lines of, if they were in my shoes, what would they have done? Sort of like I'm asking you guys. Well, they advised me to talk it out with him, and communication is the key, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not like that's something I didn't know. I knew the oldest trick in the book, but it wasn't that easy. The person I had married wasn't that easy to communicate with, especially when I had done something as drastic as this. He could definitely end me if I even breathed the same air. Luckily, I didn't. I didn't have to, because he started talking to me again. Yeah, I was as confused as you all are right now when my husband uttered his first word to me after finding out that I'd had an affair with his boss. And it had been a question on whether my mother still ran our family company. I had been totally surprised and still confused as to why he wanted that information. I got my answer a few days later. Apparently my husband went to confront my mom. Yep, he had stooped to that level, and it was unbelievable, like I could understand him confronting me or something. Heck, he could have done just that, but my mom. What had my mom got to do with it? Well, I soon found out. After my husband had gone over to my mom's place of work and threatened hell on earth, he had come back to throw my things out of the house. He hadn't even waited for me to gently pack. Nope. He had thrown my things out onto the driveway like the very sight of them had him on fire. I guess the honeymoon phase was over, and what I had done was just dawning on him. At least I was no longer confused as to what was going to happen with my husband. I was going to ask my family lawyer to draft up the divorce, and then I would go on with my life. But it seemed my husband had other plans. About a week after my husband threw me out and I packed my things back to my family house, divorce papers arrived in the mail. That was the beginning of chaos with my husband. After the divorce papers came in, The threats followed suit almost immediately. My mother had inherited our family's plastics business after my father and was a major shareholder in the company. This was what I had meant when I said my family was well-to-do. However, she had people who had invested majorly into the company from the days my dad was alive. I had no idea what to make of that since I had no interest whatsoever in towing the family line of business. But it had been something she had been drilling into my head since I was in high school. According to her, they were people watching and waiting for our downfall, so I should always be on my best behavior. It was as if we were in a drama or a soap opera with the way she had said it. But I refused to believe people didn't have better things to do with their lives than watch someone else's. My family wasn't keeping up with the Kardashians, so I paid no mind to what she had said back then. Not that there was anything I had ever done that could bring disgrace to my family. I was Miss Goody Two-Shoes until this saga with my husband. Somehow along the line of us dating, I had probably told him how my mother was big on keeping a healthy public image and whatnot. I didn't know he was going to use it against me. I had no idea that in the coming future, he would make me regret ever telling him anything about my life or knowing him in the first place. And he truly did make me regret ever knowing him. My husband decided to use my mother's weakness against her by threatening to tarnish our image to every news and media company he could find. Apparently, he had gathered evidence of me having an affair with his boss and decided to use it to set himself up for life. In his own words, I owed him after making him go crazy and lose his job. He had said it was the least I could do. Can you imagine the audacity of that man? He didn't know everything I'd ever done in our marriage had been for him. If it wasn't for him, it was because of him, and he thought he had the right to say, to even think, I owed him. Men truly had no shame. My husband truly had no shame. Heck, I had even offered to help him procure a job when the other one wanted to eat him alive, and he had turned me down only for him to resort to this. This stupid tactic, blackmailing my mother to make up for his shortcomings. Man, I was beyond enraged. I was livid, if there was a better word to describe how I felt. I was ready to have him arrested after I signed the divorce papers because no one made a nuisance of my family like that. I thought I had known who I had married, but I couldn't have had stupid plastered on my forehead any more than this. My mother was all for keeping things under the wraps about my divorce and the affair. I didn't mind. I really didn't care if people found out I had an affair with my husband's boss. I was telling whoever cared to listen that I had tried my best in my marriage. I had done what I had thought was best for my husband. He had gotten the promotion he wanted, hadn't he? Even though it had come at the expense of me sharing my bed. And I was already so deep that the only way to come out had been to hurt him. Sure, I had hurt him either way, but I never wanted things to reach that point in my life. The first time was a mistake. The second and third times had been out of frustration and someone to talk to, and the rest times hadn't been of my own will. I know I shouldn't be justifying cheating on my husband with his boss, but I need someone to understand my situation. I truly hadn't meant to, but if I hadn't done it, when would the man I had married show his true colors like this? When I'd popped out his kids? When I didn't have anyone to fall back on? I really needed to know how to be able to judge people's character on the first meeting. Was there a class someone could take for that? Well, I signed the divorce papers and handed it over to my lawyer, not wanting to have anything to do with my husband anymore. Absolute good riddance. My mother paid off his blackmail money, and I knew it wasn't a matter of time before he came back for more. Once a snake, always a snake. One could never hide their true colors forever. However, before my husband squandered the money my mother had paid him, he had asked for a meeting between me and my lawyer to finalize the divorce. I didn't want to see the bastard again, but I wanted to watch his face as I threw back everything I had ever done for him in our marriage, and how he had treated me like garbage. And I also wanted to know the reason he had proposed a meeting in the first place. Of course, as you could all guess, my husband proposed a meeting to gloat and call me all sorts of wicked names you could come up with within your vocabulary. I had just sat back and watched the person I had said I do to diminish my whole life with his words. It had been painful because I truly loved him, and even though I had said I had done it out of spite at the beginning, I realized it's one of the stupid things you do to help the people you love. Well, something along those lines, but I was greatly disappointed because I remembered how excited I was on our wedding day. I remembered how I couldn't wait to end the day with his ring and his name as mine. I had been giddy on my wedding day because I was so sure I was getting married to my best friend and the love of my life. I sat back at his lawyer's office and just couldn't believe I had been so wrong with a decision that was meant to be for life. In the face of problems, my husband showed his true colors. When he was done, trust me, I wasn't one to sit back and let someone hurl over me. I told him exactly what I thought of him. I told him how I had always been there for him in our one-year disaster marriage. I told him how it all began and how all I wanted to achieve was easing his stress. Meanwhile, I knew if the situation was turned around, he wouldn't have done anything about it from the looks of things. He came at me, that doesn't justify my sleeping with his boss, and of course I knew that. It was one of the things that was eating deep at me. I apologized for that, and there was nothing in the world that could compare to how sorry I was. But I told him I was glad it happened because without it, our marriage was still a disaster bound to happen. He had never appreciated anything I had ever done for me. He only tried to apologize when it finally dawned on him that he had been a very terrible person. And that's when he would try to buy my gifts and stuff I could very well buy for myself. I told him all that, and apparently my husband couldn't take it from the way he rained insults down on me and my family. Well, that didn't matter to me. I had said my piece. I lied. I found out how much damage my enraged husband could do to my mother and the family company. Apparently, he wasn't blushing when he had said he had evidence of me having an affair with his boss. It was like a dream, like I was living in a fairy tale that had turned to a nightmare. Luckily, it had just been within our family, but unfortunately it was a dent to my mother's name, as I was dubbed the wayward daughter who went about sharing my bed with any available man when I had a husband. I had fielded calls from every side of my family on the morning that my ex-husband had decided to release the news. I hadn't known how he had done it, but he had sent evidence to every male member in my family. As a result of this, those who had been eyeing my mother's position reared their ugly heads and started questioning her position as a chairman if she couldn't train her daughter right. My ex-husband had timed his revenge perfectly, and I had thought he was simply going to ask for more money. Lowell, I had underestimated him. It was then I understood what my mother had meant by we needed to maintain a healthy public image. I had thought there was never going to be a situation where her advice would come in handy, but I understood perfectly at that moment. I had failed her. The news of me cheating on my husband spread through my extended family quickly, and conspiracy theories started coming up as to whether my mother had done the same thing as me, because where else could I have gotten the trait from? It was so sad to watch my mother being torn apart by the backlash within our family. This was why I said I never wanted to get involved with things concerning my family. As a result of my disgrace, the group of major decision-makers in my family decided my mother was unfit to lead the company. All because I thought I was doing what was right for my husband, who had now put me in this mess. My mother was asked to vacate her position as the CEO and forced to retire. I know this was supposed to make me reflect on what I had done wrong, but it just made me hate men the more. From my ex-husband to his boss to my stupid uncles who thought my mother was their toy to discard at a whim. Well, this was how my ex-husband went after my husband because of the mistake I had made. If I could turn back the time, I would go back to before I had provoked him, because that's what had led to all this. My mother had faced disgrace and retirement because of my decision. I didn't mean for that to happen. I had ruined her public image, the one she tried so hard to maintain. I had made a mistake that had cost my mother a position she loved, a position that had kept her close to my dad, according to her. I had learned my lesson big time with this. I hope as you read this, you didn't feel judgmental towards me because this could happen to anyone. A mistake could lead to a list of downfalls in your life. This is why, in whatever you do, you must choose right. Lol, don't be like me who thought I was doing the right thing but ended up causing a disaster in my life and my mother's. This might sound like a funny story experience. I wish that's how it was for me, so at least I could wipe off the disappointment from my mother's face whenever I see her. She still tries to mask it, but I see it. All in all, I hope you guys here get the sense to be a better judge of character. That's something I'm still learning, as it had put me in ruin from my experience. Well, that's it for me, Redditors. Bye.